Hello everyone, I hope you are well. I'm Inés and the topic of my presentation is whether the minimum wage should be $15 an hour. But before answering this question, I would like to clarify some terms. On one hand, the price ceiling. This refers to when the price of a good or service cannot rise above the legislated maximum. This benefits consumers because the price of the good or service cannot exceed the maximum imposed. Otherwise, there will be more demand and less supply. On the other hand, we have the price floor. This refers to when the price of a good or service cannot fall below the legislated minimum. This benefits suppliers as the price of the good or service cannot fall below the minimum imposed, otherwise there will be more supply than demand. With these two concepts, we can see how price controls affect market outcomes. Now we are going to focus on the price floor. An important example of a price floor is the minimum wage. Minimum wage laws dictate the lowest price for labor that any employer may pay, to ensure also workers a minimally adequate standard of living. The labor market is subject to the forces of supply and demand. If the government doesn't intervene, the wage adjusts to balance labor supply and labor demand. But if the minimum wage is above the equilibrium level, the quantity of labor supplied exceeds the quantity demanded. The result is a surplus of labor or unemployment. While the minimum wage raises the incomes of those workers who have jobs, it lowers the incomes of would-be workers who now cannot find jobs. To fully understand the minimum wage, keep in mind that the economy contains not a single labor market but many labor markets for different types of workers. The impact of the minimum wage depends on the skill and experience of the worker. Highly skilled and experienced workers are not affected because their equilibrium wages are well above the minimum. But this minimum wage has its greatest impact on the market for teenage labor. The equilibrium wages of teenagers are low because teenagers are among the least skilled and least experienced members of the labor force. In addition, teenagers are often willing to accept a lower wage in exchange for on-the-job training. As a result, the minimum wage is binding more often for teenagers than for other members of the labor force. To sum up, price controls are often aimed at helping the poor. For instance, minimum wage laws try to help people escape poverty. They can raise the incomes of some workers, but they also cause other workers to become unemployed. Helping those in need can be accomplished in ways other than controlling prices. For instance, wage subsidies raise the living standards of the working poor without discouraging firms from hiring them. An example of a wage subsidy is the Earned Income Tax Credit, a government program that supplements the incomes of low-wage workers, that we will see later. And here another concept comes into play: taxes. Rent and wage subsidies cost the government money and therefore require higher taxes. They are used to raise revenue for public projects such as roads, schools, and national defense. With all this information, we now move on to answer the question of the paper. Should the minimum wage be $15 an hour? There are several reasons why workers' wages are currently too low to provide an acceptable standard of living. One big factor is that technological changes have increased the value of higher skilled work and reduced the value of lower skilled work. Data indicate that minimum wages are ineffective and delivering benefits to poor or low-income families, and that many of the benefits flow to higher-income families. That's because minimum wages target low wages rather than low family incomes. And many minimum wage workers are not poor or even in low-income families. Nearly a quarter are teenagers who will eventually find better paid jobs. Moreover, most poor families have no workers at all. Another reason to be wary of raising the minimum wage is that modest job loss overall may mask much steeper job loss among the least skilled. This is called by economists labor substitution. to describe how employers replace their lowest skilled workers with higher skilled workers. But if we really want to help low-skilled workers, we need to recognize that the solutions that actually work are expensive, difficult to achieve, or both. Guaranteeing a minimally acceptable standard of living for those who work entails redistribution of some kind. Minimum wage is one form of redistribution. Using the tax system is clearly better. The Earned Income Tax Credit, for instance, targets low-income families very well. Research establishes that it provides generous government subsidies to these families' labor market earnings and that it leads more people to work, which probably explains its bipartisan support. The labor market entry it encourages pushes down market wages, but that is precisely why it increases employment. If it did no longer wages, employers will not hire additional workers, and those not hired will be more dependent on public programs. These alternative policies will have to be financed by higher taxes, but that's a good thing. Redistribution through taxes is paid for by those with the highest incomes. In contrast, higher minimum wages are paid for by those who happen to own businesses in low-wage industries, and the consumers of the products of those industries, who are more likely to be poor. Methods of redistribution do less to harm the least skilled and more to help them. So, this has been all. I hope that you have at least a broader view of this subject and that if you can, you will look into it. Kind regards, Inés.